Hello, my name is Stuart Barker. I am the ISO 27001 Ninja, and in today's tutorial we are going to be taking a look at ISO 27001 Clause 8 Operation. We're going to do a step-by-step deep dive to give you the maximum level of success when it comes to your ISO 27001 certification. We're going to show you what it is that you need to do, and hopefully we're going to empower you and you're going to go forward and you're going to be super successful. Now, as with our previous video, what we're going to do is we're going to take each of the three sub-clauses in one video, and the reason being is, and it will become apparent, is that two of the sub-clauses we've already covered. What we're going to do here is we're going to start by reading the definition, what the standard actually says, so that we understand what it is that we are meant to be doing, and then I'm going to show you how you can go about doing it. So strap yourself in, buckle up, and get ready for another great tutorial on ISO 27001. So ISO 27001 Clause 8.1, the first of the sub-clauses, operational planning and control. When it comes to 8.1, operational planning and control, the standard says the organization shall plan, implement and control the processes needed to meet the requirements and to implement the actions determined in Clause 6. By establishing criteria for those processes, implementing control of the processes in accordance with the criteria. Documented information shall be available to the extent necessary to have confidence that the processes are being carried out as planned. The organization shall control planned changes and review the consequences of unintended changes, taking action to mitigate any adverse impacts, adverse effects as necessary. The organization shall ensure that externally provided processes, products or services that are relevant to the information security management system are controlled. So actually, this is probably the first time that we've seen the standard deviate within a subclause across multiple topics. Normally where we go through the standard, a clause, a control or a sub clause in this case would cover one area. This one is actually covering many areas. So let's unpick that and look at how we can go around that. So we need to plan and control the processes necessary to meet the requirements of Clause 6. Now, Clause 6 was about identifying objectives and understanding and doing risk assessments and understanding what our risks are. So what this is basically saying is that the processes that make up the management system need to be documented. Now, documented processes is going to fall into two categories. There are going to be documented processes for the Information Security Management System, the ISMS. Then there are going to be documented processes that support the Annex A controls. The Annex A controls, as we've touched on previously, are going to be documented in your Statement of Applicability, your SOA, and you are going to choose those Annex A controls based on risk, the risk that you've identified as part of Clause 6, and the needs of your business. So what do we need? We need documented processes for the ISMS. We need documented processes for our controls. We need documented processes. We've said this many times. The ISO 27001 standard is documentation heavy. Hey, I didn't write the standard. You're the one that's wanting to certify against it. This is what you signed up for. It is very likely that you are already doing the majority of the things that are required, and we will cover those when we get to Annex A in the implementation of controls, but usually your level of documentation is going to be sporadic. This is saying document those. When it comes to the Information Security Management System, the processes that you need to manage that are provided as part of the ISO 27001 Toolkit, the ultimate toolkit for ISO 27001 certification. Clearly, it gives you everything you need, and it gives you the documented processes, how to do continual improvement, how to do risk assessment, how to manage your management review meetings. All the things that you need to do are already documented. If you're not getting the toolkit and you're going to do this yourself, which we have absolutely no issue with, make sure that the processes that make up your management system are documented. We've covered in previous videos, in fact the last video we looked at documented information, and there are requirements around what that documented information needs. It needs classification and it needs version control. So review that video. Be sure to go and check out that video and look at how your documents need to be structured, but be sure to document those processes. We need to make sure that we are implementing those processes in line with the criteria. Now the criteria is based on our objectives and based on our risk. The clause then says that documented information shall be available to the extent necessary to have confidence that the process has been carried out as planned. Not only is it important that we document our processes are going to have outputs, our processes are going to have inputs, and what we need to do is evidence those inputs and outputs of those processes. Usually that is going to be in the form of reports that are generated. So I can think here around things like internal audit reports, external audit reports, IT management reports, monthly reports about your antivirus status, your patching status, your inventory, the number of new users, your help desk calls. Those kind of outputs that come from the processes need to be documented and need to be recorded. And those requirements are covered in other clauses, and we will come to those. But we need to make sure that that documented information is available. Do we have the process? Is it documented? Yes. Does it meet the documentation requirements of the standard? Yes. Do we know what the inputs are? Yes. Can we show those inputs on a regular basis? Yes. Can we show those outputs on a regular basis? Yes. Do we have evidences of those? Yes. Then we are going to be absolutely golden. The next part of the clause then looks at change, right? It takes a segue. So now it's looking at change management. Now, change management will be covered in more depth in other videos and in other guides. It is actually an Annex A control in its own right, but the standard here is calling out to it to say that changes should be planned and reviewed, and the consequences of unintended changes should be assessed and actions taken to mitigate those. We've already touched on change in terms of the management system itself. So you will see when we discuss the 6.3 planning changes to the ISMS, the new clause that came in that has pushed us to document what we were already doing, which is planning our ISMS changes throughout the year. So things like our annual review, our annual update, our annual business continuity test, our annual pen test, our annual risk review. There are many things that happen throughout the year that can change our ISMS that need planning, and we've covered that in 6.3. My feel here is, and it's covered in other clauses, so it will be true, it will happen either way, but what this is looking at is saying that the processes that we've got, you need to include change management, right? So when we're making changes, do we have a change management process? If you have a change management policy, you have a change management process, and you're following that structured change approach, then this is going to be golden and you're going to be satisfying that no problem. The next part of 8.1, again, it's a smorgasbord, right, is the organization shall ensure externally provided processes, products or services that are relevant to the information security management system are controlled. What this is alluding to is third-party supplier management security, securing the supply chain. Again, this is an Annex A control. It's a control in its own right, and there are more detailed guides and blogs and videos on how we do that. This is about identifying our third-party suppliers. This is about having that third-party supplier policy, that third-party supplier assessment process. This is about having a third-party supplier register, all covered in the other blogs and guides. And within that register, then we're assessing and we're tracking and we're monitoring, measuring and controlling those suppliers. A top tip here is, and I think it will come in later down the line, is to make sure that you have regular reviews with your third-party suppliers against their performance against contract. Again, within the 2022 update, it's always been there, but people, the auditors seem to have their bee in a bonnet around that as well. We will touch on that in more detail. So that is 8.1, operational planning control. Summarize, summarize, and summarize again. Document your processes. Document your processes for both the information security management system and for the Annex A controls. Document your processes in a way that is structured to meet the requirements of the document markup that the standard is pushing you down. Version control. classification, right? All the good things that we covered in the previous video on documented information. Make sure that changes are planned throughout the year. Make sure that you have a change management process in place. Make sure that when the processes are operating, that the inputs and outputs to those processes are recorded and evidenced so that you can show them, that you can show that the process was operating and operating effectively. And for third-party suppliers and third-party products and services that impact your information security management system, follow the third-party supplier policy and process covered in another blog. We're going to cover the other two sub-clauses of 8 here, really, because the next two are really fast, right? ISO 27001 clause 8.2, information security risk assessment. We've covered this so many times. 27001 is a risk-based system. If you are coming to this blog out of sequence, then go and look at the blog and the video on clause 6. Have a look at the blogs and the videos on risk and risk management. What this is saying is that we will perform, let's read it. The organization shall perform information security risk assessment at planned intervals or when significant changes are proposed or occur, taking account of the criteria in clause 6. The organization shall retain documented evidence of the results of the information security risk assessments. So this is about, we've got that policy. We've shown you previously, you've got that process. I've walked you through the process of how you do risk assessment. We do risk assessments at least annually. Then we do them as significant change occurs. We include them ideally within our projects, within our software development cycles where it is appropriate to do so. The bare minimum you need to do is an annual full risk assessment. 8.3, ISO 27001 clause 8.3, information security risk treatment. Again, a repetition, right? Let's read it. The organization shall implement the information security risk treatment plan. The organization shall retain documented information of the results of the information security risk treatment. What is this saying? We have the risk policy, we have the risk process, we have our risk register. We've covered it so many times about how to conduct risk. What it's saying is when you get to your risk treatment, document that risk treatment. Document what it is that you are going to do or what it is that you did do and maintain that as evidence that you did it. It is going to be the outputs of your risk assessments. It's going to be version controls of your risk registers. It's going to be minutes of meetings where they were discussed. It's going to be evidences from new processes and new controls that are put in place. What it's basically saying is when you do your risk treatment, evidence that that treatment worked and was effective. So there is a lot in there in terms of to do. In fact, the to-do aspect of this very short clause is probably one of the most significant aspects because it is documentation, right? This is about writing down and documenting the processes that you do or you're going to do or that you need to do, doing it in the right way. If I was going to give you a top tip, my ISO 27001 Ninja top tip, and I come across many times, is include within your processes exception steps, right? What will often happen is you will write a process that is waterfall, linear, and assumes a certain outcome. Within your process, my top tip is to include an exception step, at least one. What if something goes wrong? Example, if you implement a change and the change goes wrong, what is your exception step? If you do a HR background check on an employee and it fails, what is your exception step? What are you going to do if that fails? If you install antivirus and it's running on all of the machines and you find a virus has infected a machine, what are you going to do? What is the exception step? It is useful because it's part of process documentation and planning and control, but it is also something that auditors will pick you up on when it comes to the audit. They like to look at your processes and say, but what if? What if this went wrong? What if that went wrong? Better that you have second guessed that and provided the evidences for that, cut that off at the pass and saved yourself either a minor non-conformity or an observation up front. So, my name is Stuart Barker. I am the ISO 27001 Ninja. That was ISO 27001 Clause 8 operation. And until the next video tutorial, peace out.